Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Christina King, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Ask Jama, Shortcuts, Tips, and Tricks for Jama Connect. Before we jump in, I wanted to go over a quick orientation of your On24 webinar panel. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We'll answer as many as we can at the end. If we don't get to your question today, we will be sure to answer it offline. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. As a last note, this webinar will be recorded and available to watch later on Jama's website. In today's webinar, you'll learn some of our consultants' favorite time savers and shortcuts in Jama Connect. Whether you're new to the platform or a veteran, our goal is for you to leave here with some new skills you can apply right away to work more efficiently in Jama Connect. Today, we're joined by Jama Software Senior Consultants, Elisa Ikenes and Zeb Giri. Elisa has more than 14 years of experience supporting large, multidisciplinary engineering teams, including at the Department of Defense. She is an active member of INCOSE and IIBA and genuinely really loves requirements. Zeb has more than 10 years experience in software consulting. With a master's in psychology, Zeb takes a people-focused approach to software deployment. Zeb works with Jama's enterprise customers to help them deploy and optimize their use of Jama. And with that, I'll hand it off to Zeb.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I hope you find this session helpful. As the agenda here says, we'll start our session by talking through the objectives of this session, and then we'll visit the topics for today and discuss a few notes about the presentation itself. After that, we'll spend the rest of the time in Jama Connect really digging in. So our objective today is really to help you become a Jama master, or at least help you on your way to becoming one. A Jama master is someone who is comfortable and confident in Jama Connect and is able to help others become Jama masters as well. So to get you there, we'll look at a few common activities in Jama Connect that we find build efficiency, and we'll point out a few of some lesser known features that tend to be helpful as well. These are things that we've identified as consultants working with many different Jama users. So Elisa and I will be switching back and forth to cover a number of topics ranging from project configuration, searching, working with relationships, through to notifications and reviews, along with some other tips. For each topic, we will cover a few things, again, that we've found helpful as consultants and that Jama users have found helpful as well. So there are a few things to point out before we jump in. First, you'll probably notice that our demo instance of Jama Connect will differ from your Jama Connect, either by a lot or by a little. Hopefully most of what we cover today will be applicable, as the topics primarily speak to general use of Jama Connect, but there may be a few things that look different or may not be completely applicable. I'm still hoping that you'll benefit from the exposure. Another important note is that some of the things we will cover may not be accessible to you based on your permissions in your Jama Connect instance. It is still good to be aware of these items, but know that you may not have the permissions to perform some of these activities. Also, we're going to assume a certain level of Jama Connect knowledge. If you are brand new to Jama Connect, you may wonder how we got to certain pages or see us navigating rather quickly. Please know that there are a lot of materials at our education site and on the community and at the Jama Help site that you can use to build your skills. So don't be discouraged if you get lost. You'll get there, and there are a lot of materials to help you. Lastly, we are not going to be covering everything. So there are different ways to do different things and different options on different pages, but we're targeting a few key things for this presentation. Again, I'd refer you to the education side or Jama Connect Help if you see something we pass over and you want to explore it more. So with that, let's jump in. All right, so we have jumped into Jama Connect here, and I'm going to be talking first about configuring a project and managing at the project level. So So one of the topics that organizations struggle with is finding the right balance between administration of Jama Connect and the managing of projects. And one way to identify where this line may be is to understand what can be managed within a project. Of course, access to this area that I'll be presenting is permission-based, so you would need the manage project permission within Jama Connect and within this specific project to be able to access it. So here I'm looking at a project that we've set up for this presentation. Project is called Tips and Tricks Webinar. And I'm looking at the dashboard page currently. And if I do have that manage project permission, I'd be able to access the project configuration by either clicking on the drop down here that says project, and I'll see the configure project option. Additionally, another route there is to click on the gear up here at the top by the project name, and you can select the configure option here as well. And once I click that by either means, I will see another page pop up. This is the configure project page. And I'll see a number of tabs across the top here that speak to what can be controlled within the project by the project manager. So anything from the item types that are being used in this particular project, all the way through to managing the tags that are used in this project, and potentially adjusting the workflow if deemed necessary. Now, adjusting the workflow is a permission that would be granted, or an access that would be granted by the administrator. So if you do come in here and you're not able to override the workflow, just know that that's an administrative setting determining whether or not that's possible. But what I wanted to point out is really where the overlap is most between the administration of Jama Connect and the project administration. And that's really has to do with the users and groups and permissions within a project. So first I'm going to click on the tab here that says users, and this will give me a list of all the users that have some sort of access to this project. And the list of people that will show up here, the list of users, is actually determined by the organization administrator. So this is the person that has access to this Jama administration and is able to designate which people have access to which projects. Now as the project administrator, I'm not actually able to alter the users that have access to this project. But with the users that do have access to this project, I am able to group them in ways that make sense for my project. So if I click on the groups option here, I'll see a number of groups that are already accessing this project. And you can see that there's a few different types, or a couple different types here. So one is organization, and these are the groups that the admin has set up and that have access to this project. And you'll notice that there's another type here called project. So this is a project-specific group that I created with my manage project permission for this particular project. And you can see the name of this group here is project stakeholders, and I've added a couple members to it already. To create a group in my project, there's an add group option in the upper right here. And so I can just go through creating a new group. I'll create a group called System Engineers, and I can add, again, I'll have the list of users that have some access to this project based on the administrator. But from those users, I can organize whichever users I want into this particular group. So here I have another project group now called System Engineers. I've added a couple members to it. And I can alter those members if I need it, or manage the group's subscriptions or the group name if needed. I can also remove the group as the project manager. Now, one of the key reasons that you might create a group on your project is to manage permission and access within your project. So if I jump over a tab here to the project permissions, I'm going to see the existing permissions within my project starting at the project level. So here I see the Tips and Tricks webinar. Again, this is the name of my project. And I can see the access or the permissions that have been granted to this project already. So some of this access may have been determined by the administrator. And you can see as I click through that access is going to be inherited down through the tree. So you can see the inherited column here all says true. And so these permissions are being inherited by higher level access, which was determined at the project level. Now, as the person with the project manage permission or the manage project permission, I can come into any level within my project. So this mirrors the project structure that I've created in my project. And I can grant access to any particular group or change access to any particular group within this structure. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add that new project I created to this level in the structure, the system requirements. And so I'll go into the add permissions. And here I'll see that group that I created for my particular project. And I see it's a project group because it says tips and tricks as opposed to organization. And I'll just go ahead and add that system engineers group to this for this permission. And I'm going to give this group the create and edit permission, which naturally gives them read access as well. So this just notes that I could also create a group with read access to locations within my project. So I'm going to go ahead and give this group create and edit right to the system requirements level of my project. And when I hit save there, you'll notice that I have the system engineering group not inherited, but directly accessing this level of the project. Now, depending on the permission they have in other locations of this project, they may be able to only have read access, or they may not even be able to see portions of this project, depending on the permissions that I set up at other locations. Now, of course, in the spirit of collaboration and visibility within Jama Connect, we recommend, of course, that you primarily grab at least read access to users within a project and across projects. And this helps everyone know what's going on and serves the purpose of providing transparency. But there is the ability, just note that you can really tighten up the security within a project if desired. So as you can see here, adding groups within your project is a good way to manage permissions at the project level. But there's other reasons that you might want to add groups within your projects. And two of those have to do with the collaborative aspects of Jama Connect, and one of those being the comments. So if I'm looking at my project here, I'm looking at the dashboard. On the far right, there's a link here to Stream View. And Stream View is where we can see all the conversations that are happening at this project level or across the items that are located within this project. And if I wanted to start a new conversation here, I could just click into the stream. And I have the option now of mentioning not just individuals, but also groups within this project. So I can select, start typing system engineers, and you'll notice the system engineers group that I just created shows up. And so now I can initiate a conversation with this group specifically, and each of the people in this group would get a notification about this comment that I make. Additionally, when you're creating a review in Jama Connect, you can use this group as the list of people to include in the participants of a group. So I'm going to quickly jump through the setup of a review here right to the participant level, and just to point out that that group that I created for my project shows up in the list of available participants for my particular project. And you can see they show up in the project team. And when I click on that, I'll see the list of users, and I can add all of these users for a particular review. So you may have a group called reviewers in your project, or approvers, or something like that that you can use for easily generating a participant list within your project, in your review. One other key piece that you could use groups for within your project has to do with subscriptions. So if I want that system engineering team to be notified about new defects that are added in this project or any updates to defects within this project, I can have them subscribed to the set of defects within the project. So if I click on defects here and I go to the view for defects, now I'm seeing the information about this particular set. And under actions here, I can go to subscribe others and select to have the system engineers automatically subscribed. Again, this is the group I added in my project. Now I have them automatically subscribed to this set within my project. And so they'll be notified about any new defects that are added in my project or any changes to defects within this particular project. And you could really do that at any level within this particular project structure. So these are this area of group management and permissions is where organizational administration of Jama Connect and project management within Jama Connect really overlap. And so the recommendation here is to try to identify some high-level groups at the organizational level that are managed by the admin, possibly like all read access groups, things like that. And then let the project managers manage the groups and permissions within their particular project. And with that, I'm going to end this discussion on configuration of a project and hand it over to Elisa.
Thank you, Zeb. For our users who want to find information and navigate more efficiently within Jama, one tip is to use the search bar to its full potential. For example, I'm going to search for the term hardware, and you'll see that Jama pulls up all of the items within Jama containing that keyword. It's not limiting the results to words found in the name or the description. It's truly looking for that keyword everywhere within that item. Let's say I type in a keyword where there's only one result. Jama will actually just go ahead and open up a window taking us directly to that item so that we can hit the ground working with it, editing it as needed. Let's say that we want to limit our search results to a specific field. For example, let's say that we want to search only the name field. Jama allows us to do that simply by utilizing the colon in our search. So for this example, again, we're going to search only the name field, put in a colon, and the key term that we're going to be looking for is America. So you'll see that our search results do, in fact, come back with all of the Jama items containing the keyword America, but only in the name field. One under-recognized functionality of Jama's search feature is its capability to search within the content of Word, PDF, and text attachments that contain a keyword. So let's say, for example, we're going to search the key term, banana, and Jama pulls up that attachment as well as showing us the item that that attachment is connected to. Again, you can see that banana isn't anywhere in the name of the document, anywhere within the item itself. It truly is just contained within the text of that Word document. And while we're here, this actually segues nicely into another one of my favorite features of Jama, which is the Find Me feature. So sometimes you're working with an item and you're not quite sure where in the Project Explorer tree it falls. By going over to Actions, Find Me, you'll see that Jama will open up the Explorer tree and show you exactly where that item is found within the project structure, which can be very handy. For our users who like to work within our trace view, they may not have noticed that you can save multiple views to facilitate working with or managing items in different capacities. So you can see here that I've saved a couple different views. Let's say I want to view and work with my requirements from a PM perspective, so I have my priority and status. But say just as quickly, I want to check my verifications. I can go to that saved view and see my upstream items as well as the downstream items. Here in this example, I have my verifications as well as all the test runs along with their status. So you can see that I can save a bookmark, which will add this to my homepage, which I'll show you in just a minute. One thing you might notice is that you don't have the option to make this view public. What you can do is simply take a copy of that URL and share it with your team members that you would like to have access to that view. So back to this bookmark, let me show you where that's going to save it. So if you go to your homepage, you'll see now that that view I've created for my verifications is indeed stored under my bookmarks, my bookmark section of my homepage. To close up this topic, I would like to point out that our user guide has a plethora of handy tips for searching within Jama, and I wholeheartedly recommend all Jama users utilize it to enhance their Jama experience. And with that, I'll hand you over to Zeb to talk about relationships.
Okay, great. Thanks, Elisa. And I'm going to talk about relationships, specifically tips for relating items in Jama, and then I'll jump into a bit about impact analysis. So let's start with relating items. First, most users understand what relationships are in Jama and hopefully know a few ways to view relationships, but there are a few things that I found helpful to point out to users, and that has to do with creating relationships. So of course, within an item, relationships can be established using the relationship widget, and this will relate existing items. So as you can see, I'm looking at an item here called waterproof. It's a system requirement. And if I were to go into the relationship widget, I'd be able to see immediately the items that are related either upstream or downstream from this item. And by using the relate button on the right side of this widget, I'll get a pane that pops out that allows me to relate this item to any existing item as long as it falls within our relationship rule. Now, this is a quick way to, when you're looking at an item, to relate one existing item to another existing item. But one trick that some users aren't aware of is that you can actually relate to an item as part of creating that item. So I'm going to go ahead and close this pane here and close my widget. And let's say I'm working with my system requirement here and I need to generate a subsystem requirement. And I want it to be related directly to this system requirement. Well, from within this item, I can click my Add option at the top and go to Add Related. And you'll notice that once I select Add Related from the Add option, I get a listing of item types that I can relate to this particular item. And if I were to select Subsystem Requirement, I'll be presented with the Subsystem Requirement Create screen. And I can go through creating that new item, filling out the form. And then when I save and close, it'll just ask me, where do I want to put this? And so I'll just specify a set of subsystem requirements. And now I'll be directed right to that subsystem requirement, and that relationship with the system requirement will have been established as part of that creation. Now, this is a way to create a one-to-one relationship. So I've created one item from another item. But what I want to walk through is actually doing a few more tricks around relating items. So creating relationships that are one-to-many using the tree, and also we'll look at some many-to-many relationship creation as well. So we had seen as I was working in this particular item that I had the tree open here, and I can see my set of system requirements and all the individual system requirements in my particular project. And when I had that pane open, the relate option, I had the listing of subsystem requirements that I was working with. So I can actually go through this and select multiple items here by using, in Macs, I would use a command or control in Windows to select multiple items. And if I were to hit relate, I'd be establishing a one-to-many relationship between this item in the middle pane and the items I've selected in the right pane. And after I've related those items, of course, they'll be added to the list of related items, but you'll notice that the panes stay in place. So I can actually come over here to my Explorer tree and click through to the next system requirement. And as I click through the system requirements, you'll know that the middle pane will change, but the right pane will stay open with the items selected. So I have my subsystem requirements here already selected, and I can actually just go through and click from the left pane which item I want to relate. I could leave these open and click relate, and Jama will establish the relationships as I click through. So I'm clicking on the left, relate, clicking on the left, and maybe I just want to change this to add an additional subsystem requirement and relate. And of course, this is just building out relationships in a quick way using the tree. Now in this case, I'm generating one-to-many relationships multiple times here. But let's look at a way to generate a many-to-many relationship. So if I go back to my set of system requirements here, and initially I'll be presented with our list view. So I have a listing of all the system requirements under my set of system requirements here. And you'll notice that I can actually go through and select multiple items from this list. So do a multi-select. And if I needed to establish a relationship between the items I've selected here and an existing item, I could go to Actions in the upper right and select the Relate to Existing, and this will give us that familiar screen that we saw before, which is the relationship pane. And I'd be able to navigate down just like I did with the individual item and select one or many items in this view. And once I select those items, I can click Relate. And at this point, I've actually established a many-to-many relationship between the items that I've selected here in list view and the items that I've selected in my relationship pane on the right. Now in this case, I am establishing, again, a relationship between existing items in two different locations within this project. But let's say I also wanted to create a relationship between the items I've selected here and potentially a new subsystem requirement. So I'm working with system requirements here. Well, that add related is actually available as well from our list view. So if I look over here in the upper right at the add option and hit the drop down, you can see I have the add related. And again, I'll have a list of all the available items that I can relate to these system requirements. So I may select subsystem requirement, And again, I'll be presented with the subsystem requirement for form. And at this point, I could save this requirement. And again, I'll be asked to specify where I want to save it. But additionally, I could say I want to add another. So let's say I'm filling out connecting system requirements to these subsystem requirements. And there's a couple subsystem requirements I would like to create at this point. So if I were to select add another, I'll get save and new option instead of the save and close option. And once I click save and new, it'll ask me again where to put it. Subsystem requirements. And then give me a new add item screen. And once I'm done adding all my subsystem requirements, I can click save and close. And it'll direct me to that subsystem requirement, and it will have established a relationship to the system requirements that I had selected in my list view. And now I've created a many-to-one relationship multiple times with different subsystem requirements. Now, switching from creating relationships to viewing relationships, I found that many people know that they can use TraceView to view relationships and get a sense of impact across their project, but many people don't realize that there's a way within an item to see items that are directly impacted by that particular item. So if I were to navigate back to, say, my system requirement here called waterproof, and let's say I was going to be making a change to this particular requirement. Well, I can see directly from the relationship widget which items are directly related to this item. But if I wanted to see a true impact analysis and how change might trickle from this item beyond the directly related items, I'd be able to go up into our view option, which is here in the upper right. So I just click the view dropdown. And you'll notice there's an option here for impact analysis. And once I select impact analysis, I have another window presented to me with a few options on the left-hand side that I can select for targeting specific item types. But what I want to do is actually bring back anything that's related in some way to this item or anything related to this item directly. And so I'm going to select the downstream and upstream options, and I'm not going to limit the depth at all. I'm just going to bring everything back and go ahead and hit run. And this is sort of the typical setup for running this impact analysis. And the result is going to show me in a highlight which item I had selected or initiated the impact analysis from. And of course, I'll see the directly related items that we saw in the relationship pane. But you'll notice that I'm also seeing, by multiple degrees of separation, those items that are related to items that are related to the item that I started with. So I have waterproof here. It has a number of items directly related to it. And those items have relationships directly to them as well, and so on down the line. Now, the impact analysis is a great way to get a sense of the impact of a change that you might be making, but it's more or less considered a report. It's not necessarily actionable. There are some links to the items here, but for the most part, this gives you a visual of the potential impact of a change you might be making. So let's go back to TraceView and consider that in terms of impact analysis. So to initiate a TraceView, I would start from my list view here. And TraceView is one of the options available as part of my views. So I have my list view, reading view, and trace view here. Now, before I actually initiate this trace view, I'm going to do a quick filter so I locate that single item that I want to deal with. So I'm going to do a quick search for waterproof using the tricks Elise showed us. And I'll go ahead and search that. And I'll get my single result waterproof. So I searched by name, where the name equals waterproof, and I came up with this one item. So now if I initiate my trace view, I'll see all the items that are directly related to that waterproof item type that I started with. I'll give myself a little more real estate here. Now, trace view, of course, is configurable, so I can add, remove columns. And I can also navigate both upstream and downstream to see where this impact really is across the project. Now, one of the bonuses of working with TraceView is that this is actually actionable, and as Elisa had mentioned, it's also shareable. So I can save this, and I can also send the URL. Additionally, in terms of being actionable, if I see any gaps in coverage here, I can act on those gaps. So I can select an item in my TraceView, And those options that we just looked at before in terms of relating to an existing item or creating a new item can happen directly from trace view. Now, before I hand it back, there's one quick thing I wanted to show you with regard to viewing trace, and that's viewing traces within your tree structure. And this is something that people often ask about, the ability to view traces on this side, but don't necessarily know how to get there. So within my tree structure, you can see I have the structure broken out here, and I have my waterproof, but to see anything related to waterproof, I'd have to go into waterproof, look at the relationships, or enter into a trace view as well. But one option to see the trace directly in Explorer is to go into the Configure Explorer option up here at the right next to the Explorer. And I have some options here for how to configure this Explorer. And one of those options is to show relationships in the tree. And once I select that and apply that change to my Explorer, the Explorer itself will refresh. And as I now drill into my tree structure, you'll notice that I can actually drill now into waterproof. And I'll see those things that are directly related downstream to this item. And so now I'm seeing here's the design description, and I can continue to drill down and actually see those things that are related beyond just my starting point, which was waterproof here. At any point, I can select within this tree, which will take me directly to that item, or if I select where this green arrow is indicating a downstream relationship, I'll get the listing of items that are directly downstream than from this particular item. So that's just a neat way to sort of view relationships within the tree itself. And hopefully this overview of creating relationships in Jama Connect and viewing impact and looking at the tree structure was helpful. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Elisa.
Most of us spend our days multitasking, and in doing so, it's easy to inadvertently delete or edit an item in error. When this happens in Jama, here are some quick tips for turning back time. The first example would be restoring an item to its previous version. Let's say that when we're working with an item, we make a change that we realize we really shouldn't have. To go ahead and restore it to its previous version, we would just take a look at the version history, and we would select the version that we wanted to make current. Go ahead and click on it, select yes. And you'll see now that the item is restored to that version, as well as creating its own unique version in Jama to capture that change. Let's say, for example, that we inadvertently delete some items. We realize after doing so that those weren't the items that we wanted to delete. By going to our dashboard and looking at our activity stream, we can see here that Elisa deleted some items. It's going to go ahead and give me the option to restore those. So I'll go ahead and select yes. Jama then tells me that it successfully restored those. I'll go back to the set that I inadvertently deleted, refresh my screen, and you'll see that those items have indeed returned. The last example, or the last tip I'll give you for recovering or undoing an inadvertent change is, let's say when you're working with your items, you inadvertently move something around. You can see here that I've moved this component. Jama tells me that I've successfully moved it, but it also gives me the option to undo it if that move was done in error. So those are some quick tips for recovering or undoing changes that we maybe accidentally or inadvertently have done in Jama. And with that, I'll turn you back over to Zeb.
Great, thanks Elisa, appreciate it. And I'm gonna continue on with notifications. So we're gonna talk about when and what notifications you get, and look at reviews and subscriptions specifically. So notifications is something that usually comes up at some point with every customer. And there are three main notifications from Jama Connect, and they come typically from Review Center, comments, or subscriptions. Each of these has some control around it, and I'll demonstrate those here. But let's start with Review Center. Now, some notifications for Review Center are not controlled. So those are going to come from invites or reminders that you might get from a review. But feedback notifications can be controlled. So first you have to understand how following works in a review, and we'll take a look at that now, and then you'll understand how you can control notifications that you get from a review. So I'm going to navigate over to reviews here, and I have one review that I'm participating on. Now here's a review where I've actually made some comments. And you'll notice if I navigate into one of the items here where I've made a comment, that is giving me the option to unfollow this item. Now it gives me the option to unfollow this item because I'm currently following this item. And the reason I'm following this item is because I made some comment on the item as part of the review. And by default, when I make a comment on an item in a review, it's going to automatically have me follow that item. Now, when I'm following an item in a review, that means whenever anybody makes a comment in this review or on this item, I'm going to get a notification about that. So one of the things I can control is when I follow things in a review, and if I want to get an email notification from a review at all. And those controls are actually done within your profile. So in the upper right of your Jama instance, you'll see your name. And when you click on your name, your profile will pop up. And it will have a number of tabs here. And one of those tabs that I want to focus on right now is Review Center. And there's really just two options within here. So one of them says, email me updates to items I'm following. And the other says, automatically follow items I have commented on. So if we remember what we just learned is that when I comment on an item, I'm automatically following it. But that's just an option. So if I uncheck this, now when I make a comment in a review, I'm not going to be automatically following that item. So to follow an item in a review now, I would actually have to say follow item. The additional option here is to determine whether or not I want to be emailed about updates to items I'm following. So if I turn that off, I'll no longer get emails, but now with this being checked, I'll still be following items that I've commented on. Now this is actually okay as long as you're proactively coming into your reviews and looking at the comments that are happening. If you do want to get emailed so that you are notified outside of Jama Connect, then you would want to leave this checked and potentially just manage the following option. So typically I might have something like this where I'm going to get emailed because I'd rather have Jama tell me what's going on in the review, but I only want to follow those items that I specifically say I want to follow. So this is a way that you can control notifications and emails that you're getting out of Review Center. But now let's talk about comments. So I'm going to go back to my project here. And I can initiate a comment directly from within item, or as we saw earlier, I can initiate a comment at the project level. So if I were to navigate into an item itself and go to the comments, I'll see that within this item, there was a comment that was made, and I was at mentioned as part of this comment. And we saw earlier that when you go to create a new comment, if you click the at, you can select a user, and by at mentioning that individual, you're essentially going to notify them through an email about this comment. Now, once I've been at mentioned on a comment thread, like I have here, at some point in the discussion, I may determine that I'd rather not get the email notifications for this particular thread. So it may be an ongoing discussion. And you'll notice here that within this particular thread, I can mute the notifications. And by clicking mute notifications, I am indicating that I no longer want to receive emails for this specific thread. Now, if I do get at mentioned again as part of this thread, I'll start getting emails again. But in that case, somebody's actively trying to pull me into the conversation. So again, this option within every conversation or every comment thread is to mute or unmute notifications. And that's another way to control the notifications that you receive out of Jama Connect. Lastly, I want to talk about subscriptions. So subscriptions are a helpful way to follow along with items or sets or components that are of interest to you. So for example, I might follow this set of defects so that anytime a new defect is added or a defect is updated, I'm subscribed to that set and I'll get a notification. So I've just turned on subscription for this set of defects. Now the notifications that come from subscriptions are through email, and I can control how often I receive those emails. And this again is something that you would locate in your profile. So back up in the upper right where we had clicked before, right on our name, there is a tab here called My Subscriptions. And from here I'll see everything that I've subscribed to. I'll have the option to unsubscribe to those, but I'm also able to indicate when I would like to receive notifications about updates or additions to items that are within my subscription list. So by default it's set to immediate. I might want to change that to daily. I could potentially change that to weekly, in which case I'm getting a weekly digest of all the changes. I tend to find that daily is good. Weekly has a lot of information in it that might not be helpful, and immediate is too much at once in my inbox. So I tend to set it to daily. Now once set to daily, I'll get an email each day that will be a digest of everything that's happened, in this case within this set of defects. And that's a bit about notifications and how you can control notifications. And with that, I'm going to send it now back to Elisa.
Thanks, Seb. For my final topic this morning, I would like to share a single but powerful tip for improving your feedback when participating in a review. We have all received emails or various communications where the content is presented somewhat vaguely. Is the sender asking me a question? Would they like me to do something with this? Jama's Review Center includes a feature to help avoid such a scenario by allowing participants to categorize their feedback. For example, we're looking at this review and it's saying here that it's between 2 and 2 millimeters. That seems redundant. So we could go ahead and add our comment to this. This seems unclear. And we can go ahead and categorize our feedback as a question, a proposed change, or this is an issue. In this case, we'll go ahead and categorize this as a question and go ahead and submit our feedback. Adding this context to your review comments helps ensure clear, efficient feedback and allows the moderator to filter and manage feedback by its assigned category. Again, this is a single but very powerful feature, and it's one that I strongly encourage all of my clients to utilize when using the Review Center in Jama. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Zeb.
Thanks, Elisa. And before we wrap up, I wanted to point out just a couple additional things about items that I find helpful. And the first has to do with version comments. So you may have noticed that when you first start using Jama Connect, that whenever you go to save a new item, you'll get a notification window. And you can turn off that notification window by unchecking this notify box in the lower left of your item. So here I'm looking at a new system requirement that I'm adding into the system. And if I'm just starting out in Jama Connect, by default, I'll have this notify option checked such that when I click Save and Close, I'll get the comment and notify page. Now, I could easily just turn that off by clicking the notify checkbox here. And now when I save, the Save and Close will close and I'll go directly to that item page. Now, you may actually want to use that notify option though in the future, maybe not necessarily to notify individuals, but to potentially save a comment with the version or the change that you're making to the item. So let's say I'm dealing with this new item that I've added into my Jama instance, and I'm going to be making a change. Item. There we go. And instead of just doing a save and done, which is now my option in this edit page, there's a little arrow on the right that allows me to get back to that notification window that we saw before. So if I click this little arrow in the lower right and select Save and Notify, I'm back to that Save with Notification page. And although it says Save and Notify, I'm actually able to save a comment. I don't necessarily have to notify individuals that I'm saving this change. So at the top, however, I may want to say that this was added from meeting with customer. And I'll go ahead and save that change. And you'll notice I'm not actually going to notify anybody, but I am making a comment that's going to be associated directly with this version. So now if I go to my versions page, I'll see that I made a change. So I've gone from version 1 to version 2. The description has changed. And here is that comment that I made with this version of the item. So anytime I make a change, I have the option of saving a comment with that version. Now it's important to note that that comment is separate from the comments that we see here. So this is the specific collaborative area within Jama where we have discussions around the item. And what I was showing you with the Save and Notify option is the ability to add a comment that sticks with the version of that item. So one last thing that's helpful to remember is that almost anything in Jama Connect has a unique URL. From projects to baselines, the trace view, and even items themselves. So if ever you want to share an item with someone, you can send them the URL. So if I'm looking at this particular item here that I just added, you'll notice in the browser that this item has a unique URL. I can actually email this or send this to an individual, and when they click that link, they'll be directed to Jama Connect and to this specific item. The same applies to projects themselves. So if I copy this URL and I send that to an individual, they'll be brought directly into Jama and to this particular location, which is a project in this case. Now, of course, we encourage bringing people into the Jama Connect system by using the discussion thread or by using your comments. And again, you can @mention an individual, they'll get an email, and that too will link them directly into Jama, and it will allow you to capture any discussions within the system. So those were the topics that we wanted to cover today. So we've gone through the configuration of a project, finding information, establishing relationships, recovering, dealing with notifications, review center tips, and now we just learned a little bit more about items. And I just wanted to point out before we wrap up where you can get help on more topics and go deeper into these topics. So the first is our education site. So at education.jamasoftware.com, we have a number of free tutorials that walk you through all sorts of topics, ranging from basic use of Jama through reuse and sync and release management. A lot of these videos are pretty short, and so they're able to be consumed easily. And some of the videos go into a bit more depth and give you a lot more information about a particular comment or topic. Additionally, we have our community site, which is, if you're a user of Jama, you should join this site. You create an account here, and you can ask questions, submit feature requests, and look at feedback from other users of Jama. Additionally, it's helpful from the community to access the release notes and see what's new in Jama. And that's actually pretty easy to get to if you're right at the community. There's a link to release notes here. Lastly, help.jamasoftware.com. This is a great site for searching for content or just navigating through to learn more, and you can dig deeper into the topics that we cover today. Again, I hope this session has been helpful for everyone and that you've learned a bit more about Jama and are on your way to being a Jama Connect master. And with that, I'll send it back to you, Christina.
Hi, Elisa. I have a couple questions about the Review Center to start. This first one is, if I have a group of people that I involve in reviews across all my projects, is there a way to bypass having to add them into each project individually?
Absolutely, Christina. So users can contact their org admin, who can then go to the permissions tab within Jama, and that individual can then delegate the group that frequently participates in reviews across all projects within their Jama instance, and simply grant that user group permissions at the organization or company level, which will then be inherited out to all the individual projects.
So, is there any other benefit to using an organization group as opposed to a project group? What really is the difference there?
Absolutely. Let's say, for instance, you have a QA team that is going to be the same across all of your projects. By creating a group at the organization level, it not only allows you to pull that user group into your reviews, but it also allows you to interact with them in the collaboration stream by @mentioning QC. And that will then send an email notification to all the individuals within that group, notifying them that they've been mentioned in the collaboration stream on a Jama item, inviting them to then come into Jama and participate in that discussion around that item.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So it's just another method to allow cross-project collaboration. Another question then about Review Center. Do Review Center comments show up in the stream?
No. So Review Center comments are actually housed and kept separate from the project collaboration stream. All comments that are collected during a review are housed in the review and stored in the Review Center within Jama.
So if you were looking at an item, how would you be able to tell if that item had been sent to a review, if its comments aren't included on the item?
That is a great question and one that comes up often. So by looking at an item's history, you'll be able to see that a baseline has been created when an item has indeed been involved in a review. The name of that baseline corresponds with and matches the name of that review. You can then go out to the Review Center, take a look at that review if you do want to get more context behind what all happened and all the feedback that was collected during the review of that item.
Okay, next question. I noticed that you've added a lot of features to TraceView in recent releases. So what are the advantages of using this over Coverage Explorer?
Yes, so our TraceView does have some amazing functionality. It allows you to look not only downstream, but back upstream. Another great thing about this is it doesn't limit the amount of items that will return when you're looking at this. So with TraceView, you get unlimited results. So you can keep going down and down and down, or up and up and up and up.
And what about the ability to share? How do you do that?
Yes. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you do have the ability within the Trace View to save views within the Trace View. You can also share these simply by taking the URL and sending that to whoever you're hoping to collaborate with.
Cool. So I would just like to make note here, since you're showing off all of these cool new features that have to do with the Trace View, that Jama itself as an application also has a cool new name. We recently split our offerings up into more than one option. So we have an analytics tool called Jama Analyze, and with that we renamed Jama, which some of you have been with us for so long you know it used to be called Contour, but we renamed that one Jama Connect. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. All right, and then the next question I have for you is a completely different topic. How do I export directly to Word from Jama with a custom Office or Word template?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. And like most questions, the answer comes at the very beginning. So the first thing that we always want our users to do is to go to their own instance. And if you go to Export Office Templates, you'll see here that there's an option to upload a template. But when you select on that, there's also this little indicator comes up allowing you to generate a Word template reference guide. And what this is going to do is it's going to generate a template guide that's specific to your instance. So for our users that sometimes are pulling best practices, make sure that when you're using a Word template reference guide, that you're using one not only from your own environment, but also the most current version of that. Our service team has consolidated some helpful tips and best practices on our community page, where you can see right here under service practices. And I would just like to point out that we've put together this custom Word template easy start guide, which is really going to help our users get on the road quickly when they're building those custom Word templates.
So where would you recommend beginning as a very first step in creating your own custom templates?
So I would recommend starting here, but again, closely aligning that with going back to your own environment and generating the Word templates reference guide that's specific and unique to your own Jama instance.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, we will be sending a follow-up email that includes a link to the recording and slides, so keep an eye out for that in your inbox next week. If you asked a question that we did not get to in the Q&A, we'll be sure to follow up with you offline. As you exit the webinar, we ask that you please participate in a short survey. Your feedback is important to us and helps us determine future webinar topics. Thank you again for attending, and have a great rest of your day.